So unlike Vincent, I'm going to attempt not to say anything offensive in my speech or my introduction. I'm just going to start by saying, it was really strange that when the first affirmative came on and told us that there were two groups of prostitutes, a group of prostitutes who presumably they called middle class and were able to actually make choices for themselves, and a group of prostitutes that they called exploited and weren't able to make choices. They then pretended that the first group of prostitutes didn't exist. Because the whole point of our case was that under a system where you could legalize some brothels, where you could institutionalize some brothels, these were the prostitutes who were likely to exist, and it would, via each other's game, diminish the need to use exploited people to traffic in women and things like that. So that was the entire point of our case. But we had something that dealt with even these prostitutes who were legitimately making choices, because they told us, first and foremost, that in principle prostitution was bad. And that's what we're going to deal with first before moving on to this talk about the black market. So the first question then was prostitution in principle bad? And we found two equivalences where prostitution is like many other things we do. We're not saying that it's particularly a good choice for women to make these choices, but we're saying they're acceptable choices because they are akin to other choices we make. So again, we are not standing for women who exchange sex with men who are in some kind of power relationship with them, but we say it's something that we accept as something that happens in society. It's not something that the government steps in back to recognize that people can make those choices. Similarly, we do these things for labor rights, where you choose to labor and sell your hard work in exchange for some kind of wage. That is no different from using other parts of your body to do the same thing. They told us, but that means that content is purchased. That's exactly what we do when we sign contracts. We sign away our right to make content decisions down the line because we're making a decision at the moment of that contract. So insofar as we have to accept that some women can make these legitimate choices, some of the time those choices are protected under the sort of things that we do all the time. The last thing we told us here was that prostitution entrenches these really negative mindsets of sex. And so even if the individual choices in making prostitutes were making were fine, that they had broader impacts for how we build sex altogether. We thought that was really strange because what we see is that we don't think prostitution equates to everyone's view of sex. In fact, that seems incredibly bizarre, where prostitution is often the result for people to do things that they wouldn't be usually able to do in their sex lives, right? So if you can't have sex, then you pay someone to have sex with you. Or if you can't have sex the way you would like, you pay a prostitute to do the things that your wife or your girlfriend wouldn't do for you. That's why kink clubs exist and things like that. Because prostitution is an avenue for people to express their fantasies that they wouldn't be doing in normal life. So we don't think people have the same view that what a prostitute does is identical to what people do in their sexual lives. We thought that was weird. But at best, we thought they instrumentalized these ideas themselves. Because they said the main problem with these things about prostitution was that people were exploited. And that was really the end of the debate. But we thought that on many counts, and here is my second issue, really, that we got better protections for these people. So consistently down the line, we made that comparative between a world where some prostitutes receive regulations and a world where all prostitutes were illegal. Here's what they missed with their analysis. Because the incentives when all prostitution is illegal, for example, is that you never have to hire the middle class prostitutes which can make choices for themselves. Under our model, what you do is that if you want to be a legal brothel and you're going to operate legally, you have to hire women who have ID checks, aren't trafficked, aren't addicted to drugs, and things like that. Because if you were to do these things, we would go to your brothel, nab you and say you are breaking the law. On the other hand, all prostitution were illegal, you would never have to hire these women, right? You would never have to hire women who can actually make choices and would presumably will command a higher fee because the likelihood of a woman who has other choices choosing to be a sex worker presumably means she demands more in return for sex. But that means that they were more likely to hire people who are trafficked because you didn't have to keep these regulations. And so you're more likely to get the sort of exploitation under their side of the house. We thought that was the real comparative that they missed on their side. More than that, we thought the sort of what they raised about it being easier to police, simply because you couldn't make a distinction between illegal prostitution and legal prostitution was kind of strange, right? Because illegal prostitution looks the same on both sides of the house. Illegal prostitution, for example, takes the form of a pimp running a ring of prostitutes who he sends to various hotels when the client calls for it. That is likely to happen, that looks identical on both sides of the house. It doesn't change its shape or form. So what we didn't get under their model was the ability of people to go to a particular model which is institutionalized, which was observed by the government, which is checked, so that the prostitutes were in proper health. What we did transient sort of prostitution that went in and out of hotels that was much more difficult for the government to hinder. That meant all these sort of protections that we wanted to see for prostitutes were less likely to happen under their model because fulfilling that demand was something they could only do under this shadowy transaction. But what they missed ultimately, and this is my third issue, why really from this debate, is because they missed the broader numbers game that prostitution is about. What they said was we dissuade demand from occurring, without realizing that fundamentally you don't make that demand go away simply because people want to follow the law if they think they can avoid getting caught. So we thought in our work, we're happy for the overall number of prostitution to go up. We thought there would be more prostitution under our law. But a large part of that would be prostitution in legalized brothels with sex workers who have made real and legitimate choices. What they did on the other hand is that they shrank the net number of prostitutes and the net number of pimps operating. But all these people were operating in shadowy corners with absolutely no protections for their safety. So what people felt was the comparison that they got in their side of the house. Because of that, because the overall numbers game didn't change, because you couldn't shrink demand by that much, and because demand remained constant, we thought we were happy to serve that demand in a far more safe environment than the sort of shadowy, negative way they wanted to do it. We're very proud of this.